Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. Today we'll be meeting the 23-year-old who launched her own game to teach people about the systems of oppression. Meet Toiell Washington. She's an amazing young lady who's overcome her own pain. She started by learning that not doing so well in something is not always your fault. Sometimes the fault is methods of teaching. She learned from that pain to excel, and not just excel, but that pain taught her the value and importance of helping others. But before we go into her, let me tell you a little bit about who Toiell Washington is. She's a 23-year-old Boston native and co-founder of the Black Boston, a community organization that strives on uplifting and support of Black Bostonians. She spends her early year advocating for her work in domestic gun and other violence prevention. She has found a love for civic engagement. She just recently graduated from university. Alongside her role at the Black Boston, she's launched her own Black-owned game company to teach people about the systems of oppression. Called the Master Tools LLC. It is a strong application for education and non-traditional learning. Her Master Tool is a Black-owned family game company that helps people have conversation about system of oppression and tell them the very story of oppression identity group. The primary goal of the company is to promote self-education and social awareness through fun and competitive gaming. And I'm truly excited I've got the honor to speak to Toiell about her work, how she found her joy through the pain she had to go through, and how that has taught her the valuable lesson of helping others. Meet Toiell Washington. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. Today's conversation is truly amazing. The young lady, as I said in my introduction, has done so many amazing things. She'll be talking to us about how her journey started, what led her to this path of helping others. Meet Toiell Washington. How are you today?
I'm great. It's really nice outside. I'm here in Boston, so we're just now kind of getting that summer weather that we've been waiting for all year. So it's definitely a nice day.
And is there still that COVID then? Is there people still nervous about, COVID has really taken its toll on so many people. Did you notice is that people still nervous about it? How is it out there in Boston?
I think that Massachusetts is a really high up there state in terms of healthcare. And so we're almost at like I think we're already at 70% of people are vaccinated. So I think that a lot of people are just kind of comfortable. People still wear their mask and things, but I definitely do see people comfortable. And as of right now, Boston is open up entirely, so everything is open: buildings, businesses, restaurants, full capacity. So
It's,
people aren't as scared as they were like a few months ago.
I know. I think a few months was just so terrible, and it affected so many people in different ways. And I'm just hoping things can slowly get back to normal. But now this is truly about you because you are truly amazing. I can't stress the work you're doing, not just within yourself, but community at large. You're finding different ways to help communities by using non-traditional methods that people will use to learn and stuff. Before we go into all of that, can you just describe a little bit about who you are?
Sure. I'm Toiell, as you all know now. I actually just graduated with my bachelor's of science in sociology a month ago
Oh,
from today. Yeah,
goodness.
thank you. Yeah, so I'm just kind of now stepping into like the full-time entrepreneurship journey. A little bit more about myself. I kind of started doing kind of community outreach work, nonprofit work, work in the activism realm. Since I was 16, I did a lot of like violence prevention stuff for since like a very young age. And recently, about a year ago, around the time of George Floyd's murder, people kind of protesting for the Black Lives Matter movement. Myself and two other college age Black women organized the largest Boston protest for Black Lives Matter, which actually ended up being one of the largest Black Lives Matter protests in the history of Boston. So it resulted in like about 25,000 people. And since then, I've just been doing a lot of work on trying to do non-traditional learning, as you said. So we turned our organizing group into a nonprofit, which is Black Boston, where we do a lot of political advocacy and educational programming, and also some mental health awareness, just because there's a huge stigma with that in the Black community. And then I also recently launched a game company called the Master's Tools, which I named after my favorite social theory. The Master's Tools will never dismantle the Master's house. It was a quote by R.G. Lord, who is my favorite social theorist. And so the game company is pretty much different, like card, board games, that kind of style that I create to teach people about different systems of oppression and social issues through gaming. I thought that that was something just important because I kind of grew up on learning games and I always found them to be really important, especially when sometimes you don't receive the information the way you've wanted through like school. And so I decided, because I do so much work with young people, to find a way to connect with them in a different way that's fun, but also educational.
Oh, that's wonderful. When you tell your story, one of the crucial things you should, really stuck with me is the fact that you talk about maths and your difficulty in school, but you didn't let that challenge stop you from trying to achieve. And that failing your maths held you back 1 year, but you did something. What did you do? And how did you know that this method was not working for me and I needed to go with this method to try and find that, to make this method work for me?
Yeah. So yeah, I really struggled in math when I was really young. When I was in the third grade, I got held back because I struggled so much. And we would always kind of play firstinmath.com. I'm not sure if the website's still around, but it was just a math website where you just play math games. So you learn how to do, your multiplication, division, factors and all that stuff on the games. And the teachers would just let us play like the last 20 minutes of class. But I had so much fun on the website that I would go home and log in and go play again. Because for a long time, I just felt like as a young child, I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, I'm just bad at math. And then playing the game made me feel like I'm not bad at math. Like the teachers just didn't accommodate me. Like they didn't figure out a new way to teach. And I think that that's important for all educators to understand that if people are collectively struggling, then you as an educator need to figure out a new way to teach them. Because sometimes it's not about them receiving the information, it's about how you deliver it. And I started to realize through playing the math games that I'm like, I'm actually really good at math. And now I'm really good at math. Because of that, I ended up being advanced in math since from that point on. Like I even had a free block during my final year of high school because of that. And so I kind of use that to recognize that it's important to accommodate all learning styles and not just the traditional learning. So not just, writing on chalkboards and doing PowerPoints, but thinking about new ways to reach students and just reach people in a way that might be digestible for them.
I think even when you think about it, even when you look at the policies that's come out with the COVID, for example, everyone wants this one size fits all for everyone, but sometimes this one size fits all does not fit applies to everyone. Some people are very good at that method, but other people might find that this other method actually works better for them. So this what you've just shared, I think, is so impactful for so many other students out there who might be struggling with maths or struggling with any other subject. It's just actually to think probably this method of teaching has not worked for you, and you might find other diversified method that has worked. And that then there's also something that's so much truly amazing about yourself is that you're so passionate. You're so passionate that you have been advocating for the gun violence, domestic abuse. You've just been out there. What I always wonder what leads someone on to have this such strong passion to really want to advocate for others, be a voice for people who don't have a voice. What led you on this path?
I definitely think kind of going back to accommodating everyone's different learning style, I think that you can easily apply that just to life in different identities. And so we're thinking about one size doesn't fit all. We can also apply that to people's different identities. Like you may easily wake up in the morning and get in your car and walk up the stairs to your job, and you didn't think about it. But someone else may need help getting out of bed. Someone else may not be able to walk up the stairs. Somebody else may not be able bodied. And so one size doesn't fit all, you know? And so I think that if we can apply the one size does not fit all to every situation, then we can start understanding that people need to be accommodated in different ways, because when it comes down to, you know, minoritized communities, we are oppressed in different ways, which means that we need different resources, you know, we need different things. And because I learned that kind of at a young age, just my identity being both Black and a woman, and being oppressed in those two ways, I really recognize that there are so many things that keep us at a disadvantage that isn't our fault. And when you grow up, you just walk through life knowing that, like, this is my experience, this is just how life is for me. But nobody really talks about, like, there are literal systems in place that are keeping you from doing certain things, keeping you from being in certain spaces. And once I started to really get into social theory, because I really started to read and just kind of learn about that stuff. So I started reading into like Black feminist theory, and I started reading into critical race theory, and I started learning all these things. And I felt like a lot of these things could be solved. A lot more people knew about them, you know, because these are not things that they want to teach you in school. I didn't learn about a lot of this stuff in school. They didn't teach me it in school, and so I thought that it was important to go actually advocate for that. And so, like, I was like 16, and I like worked for a domestic violence prevention center where everyone else went to go work at like a CVS or a clothing store, and they're like, "Why are you like, why are you like doing that work so young?" But I just found it fascinating, and I felt like it was something very important to be vocal about.
But you learned a lot because you started at Black Boston from just being having all these experiences. And one of the things you said, you found it very hard that people for people to engage in conversation about race and racisms related to Black Lives Matter, and that led you to start the Black Boston. When you started this organization, you're one of the co-founders. What was going through your mind that I need this conversation had, but the conversation are not really impacted in our homes? What led you to start this Black Boston?
Mm. I definitely think that it was because I had seen, we named it Black Boston because we found each other on Black Twitter. And so I had seen someone who had made a statement, something along the lines of, well, at least Boston isn't that racist. And I'm just like, actually, that's not true. I think that it's not as culturally racist, like it's not as blatantly racist. You know, there aren't like Confederate flags in windows and things like that, but it's very systemically racist. Like we get followed around in stores, you know, we might say that, you know, our stomach is hurting, you know, at the front in the clinic, and they'll go like, oh, you're gonna be okay. Like it's just this, you know, it's things like that. And so I felt like with that situation, I thought there's like a lot more that we need to do to one, acknowledge it and actually fix it so that people don't think that it's the case, and people understand there are different layers of racism. You know, there's structural racism, there's cultural racism, you know, there's institutional racism. It's all these different systems put in place. And so I thought, one, what are like some of the needs of the Black Bostonian community specifically? Because um, all Black people are not the same, and we don't all need the same things. But let's recognize what are the things in our community, in our city, that are keeping us back. There's a lot of gentrification happening in our city, which is forcing a lot of Black people to move out because they can't afford, you know, the rent. You know, people are facing like homelessness because the housing is ridiculous here. You know, Massachusetts um, is one of like the top five most expensive states to live. And so there are just all these different things that are going on. And so we try to think about like, what are some things we need? We thought about like education, how many people need education, educational programming beyond the classroom, because like I said, they don't really teach that much. Political advocacy, Black people are the least politically engaged everywhere. And because of that, we felt like it was important to start transforming language, because it's not that Black people don't care, it's that they strategically make bills in a way, you know, policies in a way that people don't understand. They don't have the access to understand these things. So we thought we need to digest and transform language so that people can understand. We have mental health awareness because that's a huge stigma in the Black community that's like, oh, mental health isn't, a thing, or we don't need therapy, we don't need this, we don't need that. And so we just thought about those two things. And obviously we have community organizing because we started from a protest and we do a lot of mutual aid campaigns. I'll actually be going later. We're making care packages for LGBTQ youth in honor of Pride Month, so that we can give them, because a lot of them face homelessness. And so just thinking about all the different things that we need that are important to us. And we decided to just make it a nonprofit so that we can continue to do the work.
It's so important because I like what you said. Even with impact, our next question is leading on to COVID. With COVID, for example, a lot of people who were knowledgeable were aware of what they needed to do, where they could get the help. But sometimes, even though government might even be helping people, a lot of Black people didn't even know how to access that help. What are the things they needed to do? So on that note, a lot of them were impacted by the COVID. They were also in jobs that were COVID related as well. And
Mhm.
one of the things you clearly said, I think you said it in one of your interviews, that you saw parents struggling during the COVID-19 pandemic with working from home and also trying to help keep their kids engaged with learning. And I was like, wow, she actually, you were thinking beyond just the parents were struggling, but they were also, I love the fact that you brought up that they were also struggling with teaching their kids, and some of them didn't even have access to computers, or even if
Mhm.
they had computers, they had just one, and they had to multiple kids to share it. And you said this observation led you to start the master tools.
Mhm.
That master tool is a groundbreaking then, is something that hasn't been done before, because you just didn't think about this master tool. You thought about it from a pain, I would say from the pain of that
Mhm.
COVID brought to someone, and you wanted to make it easier. Could you just tell us a little bit about the masters too?
Mhm. Definitely. So, like I said, I kind of grew up after that, kind of playing educational games. And I worked with so many young people through the different jobs I had. And I learned that, like, they love games, they love doing scenarios and role plays and all of these different things. And at the time, I had been creating a workshop just to start conversations around the school to prison pipeline, generational wealth. Like, I was doing all these different things. And I had noticed that the way I made the workshop, if I had just kind of changed some things around, it could be a card game. And so I started kind of restructuring the way the workshop was created, and I had turned it into a card game. And then I was making tea one day and I thought of a new idea for another game. And so I had just been spending the spring thinking about all these different ideas of like how to turn different things into games to teach. And then I just decided, I had a conversation with my brother. He's like, oh yeah, you should sell these. You should just make a whole brand, because it is super hard. I have a lot of younger siblings. I'm the second oldest. And so just kind of watching everyone struggle to work and do these different things, but also have to be there for their kids, because it's very different, when your kids are at home, they don't get the support that they would get from their teachers or tutors and things like that. So it's like your parent now has to be everything, while also working. And especially if you're an essential worker, you had to leave like that. That became very hard. And then with everything going on, with the police violence happening, so many people were struggling to just have the conversations with their kids, like what's going on, like people going like, why are people protesting? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? And a lot of people, would contact me and contact us and go like, how do I even talk about this? Like, how do I even start this conversation with my kid, with my younger sibling, with my niece, my nephew? Like, how do I start these conversations with them? And they're very hard. Like, it's very hard to talk to a child and just go like, this is America. This is, the world. Like, this is what happens. And so as I was kind of playing around with the workshops and turning them into games, I thought like this would be a great way to just start the conversation. Obviously, one game or a whole line of games is not going to teach you every single thing you need to know about history or social issues, but it's a great conversation starter, and it's really good to kind of put things in perspective, because they are kind of like simulations through games. And so I decided to continue with it, and I'll actually be releasing my second game next week, which I'm really excited for.
I know, it's just so truly fascinating. I mean, because what you're truly doing is taking out that conversation. So rather than beyond the lectures, PowerPoint, chalkboard, you're taking the conversation into a fun way and bringing it into forcing that conversation to be had in the family. So, for example, if I'm to use this game to enlighten my young son, could you just tell us how does a typical game work? Because I know you launched the game in February,
Mhm.
and you have this game, Meet the Colonizer. So could you just tell us a typical how your game works? So anyone who's listen, who people are going to listen and say, okay, I want to understand this game. How would it typical work?
Yeah, so oh, actually I have it. Here is a there's a card game.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, so basically how you play, this is kind of a trivia style game with this one. So you kind of just ask one of the questions on the cards, and it'll have multiple choice A through D with the answer at the bottom. But of course, the person whose turn it is won't know. And so you kind of ask the question, and you give them 30 seconds to give the correct answer. If they don't, then you can give it to the next player to see if they'll steal the card. And if they get it, then they take the card. And the goal of the game is to get as many cards right at the end. But because of the name Meet the Colonizers, obviously, I don't use colonizers as a word of affirmation. This is something to be clear that it's like, these are things that were stolen from us, and these are lies that we were told. And so the whole purpose of the game is to kind of expose different heroes in history, systems, and ideas, and just acknowledge that like either we were taught something that was a lie or we weren't taught the entire story. And so it kind of comes at people like Christopher Columbus and how he actually didn't discover America. It comes about like feminists and how with Western culture, the whole feminist movement has been taken over by middle class heterosexual white women. And so just kind of acknowledging all the different things that they've taught us in history and taking out the buried stories that they decided not to tell us within that, instead of just using the stock story and telling it through the narrative of the minoritized communities that they harmed. And so that is the first game. Some of the questions you may have to already had went in school and learned some things to kind of point them out. Like just the way I put them, like I'll go like, who sailed across the ocean blue and didn't discover anything? And a lot of people go Christopher Columbus once they hear it. But of course, you're kind of using context clues, but it's also going to encourage self education, because there's a lot of people who go like, hey, I like read this card, I didn't even know that. And so that made me go look it up on Google, and I went to go order a book, and I went to listen to podcasts and do all these different things because I didn't know that. And that's a hope for myself, to really encourage self education, because like I said, you can't learn everything through one book, one game, on whatever. It's important to actually take initiative to go learn these things on your own. But these are going to be conversation starters to actually think about like what things should I want to go know in the first place.
Oh gosh, I love that. Thank you so much for this. But before I let you go, Tony, I have to ask you. One of the questions, in fact, I think I have two questions because I have to touch on this thing because I was blown away that you used this as your closing tagline in a interview you just did, and you said when you're uncomfortable, it means you are learning and you can't learn anything inside your comfort zone. And one of the things I struggle with, because a lot of us tend to be comfortable, we tend to be comfortable with our environment, we don't want to ask questions. And you started your journey by not being comfortable. So first you started by saying when you were doing the placements, a lot of your friends would go to CBS and
Mhm.
to go work and do retail store. But you didn't do that. You wanted to go be uncomfortable to understand what the true meaning, why were things happening. You always had questions. Where did that stem from? Where's this massive knowledge and willingness to help coming for? Helping people to overcome their pains and understand the world a lot better.
I think it definitely comes from just my own experience in wishing that these are things that people taught me, and that people helped me acknowledge, so that I didn't feel like it's my fault. Because I think that a lot of times when you're coming from a community that is placed at a disadvantage, you feel like it's your fault. Some people have learned helplessness. Some people just feel like there's nothing they can do about their situation. And I felt like now that I kind of had these tools, this new knowledge, I felt it was important so that I could help the younger generation, help acknowledge that it's not their fault either. And just seeing how many, especially in the last year, just seeing how successful Black people have been with their entrepreneurship journeys, with everything that they have been doing. I have been learning how well we can do as a collective if these systems begin to get dismantled and we start getting the resources allocated that we need. And so that definitely encouraged me to partake, in the journey and just want to participate in all the different things going on so that I could also help achieve that goal.
What's your hope for the Black race, and especially people in America? And let's touch on Black women in particular, because there's a lot of issues, and Black women tend not to talk about it. We just tend to harbor things. You're a Black woman. What is your hope for Black women in America?
I definitely a lot of people there's this strong Black woman stereotype, and I think that some people don't think about how detrimental that can be to a Black woman's mental health, because they just see it as something that's like this is a compliment, like be a strong Black woman. But when you're continuously making us feel like we always have to be strong, that doesn't give us any space to be vulnerable, and it doesn't give us any space to feel like okay now I can open up or we're always helping everyone, but who's going to help us? Who's going to take care of us? And so my hope is that Black women could actually just live in their truth and be happy and be in spaces where they can be vulnerable, where people can actually protect us, can actually take care of us. Because, throughout history, we have been at the forefront of every single movement. Globally, we have always been at the front of every single movement, always taking care of others. And my hope is that we can start taking care of ourselves, start taking care of each other, and get people to understand that we have been taking care of everyone for so long and they need to return, the favor.
Absolutely. Tony Washington, I'm absolutely delighted I spoke to you today, because I think you have a whole big future ahead of you. You're a typical example of what a typical a women should be and what we should aspire. It's all about helping, and I think sometimes we forget that. We think we're brought on this planet to just serve our own purpose, but you clearly demonstrate that the world is bigger. It's not just about us, but it's about utilizing our own lessons, which you learned from your failing of maths. Your failing of maths thing, I think, is just giving you so much room to see that that failing and that tools which you used to help yourself to pass, you've passed it on to others. And I really appreciate what you're doing. I really, but please keep shining, keep doing this great work. And I hope we connect again in the future. Thank you so much for joining me today in Painless Universal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me once again.
Thank you.